Welcome to Guided by Third Wheel, the podcast. My name is Amber Ireland, and I'm here with my co-host, Jill Bucaro. Let's get started.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to this week's podcast. Amber and I were chatting and got some feedback from some of you guys about what might be a good topic for this week. And what we heard from a couple people is they were curious about, like, what do our self-care routines look like? Mm-hmm. And maybe for us to give some examples of good self-care practices and habits and things like that. So the last couple episodes, we've talked a little bit about things that we've overcome, things that we try to avoid, things that we try to work through. And I think we're trying to be a little more positive on this one and be like, here's some things that we do that really, really work. Mm-hmm. So I would give Amber like a solid A in self-care habits. I would give myself more like, a C to C plus in self-care habits. So Amber, I feel like we should start with you to hear just what some of your, like, I'm sure there's things you do daily, some things you do weekly or monthly. Can you just kind of share a little bit about what are some of the routines that you engage in to keep yourself healthy and happy?
Yeah, so on a daily basis, and this is there's no secret, most people know. On a daily basis, I like to meditate. I generally exercise on a daily basis, and that looks different for me at different times in my life. And I just want to, I want to like caveat all of this with, this is what I do right now, but maybe it's not always been what I've done, and that I have more of an awareness to flex and change my self-care routine as I need to, based on the situations that are present in my life and the amount of time that I have available to me to engage in some of these like daily practices that take a little bit more time. So right now in my life, I generally get up, I do some exercise, maybe like 20 minutes or so, just to kind of get my brain working and I get some water into myself. I take my vitamins. Largely that time is alone. And that's kind of fulfilling to me to kind of start my day and just have those moments of silence by myself to kind of just like think about, okay, where am I at right now? How do I feel right now? And then I will do some meditation. And meditation has looked different for me at different points in time in my life. I've gone from doing, guided meditations where I'm like listening to someone kind of guide me through like a scenario or a visualization or something like that to get into a meditative state, to listening to meditative music, to chanting, to just sitting in silence, that type of thing. So right now, I find that the sitting in silence is what is helpful to me, and then I will journal after I'm done meditating. Normally, because during meditation, I sometimes get some insight. I think about things, whether it's insight, from my higher self or from a higher power, or it's just insight on, maybe I didn't get super deep in meditation and I'm just kind of like thinking about my day and working through things.
Right.
And I'll journal about that when I'm finished, because I feel like, once I can like write it down and really almost organize it on paper, it helps me be more centered and feel more whole, I guess.
Yeah.
And I normally pull cards on a daily basis, and I do that just to kind of like give myself a different perspective maybe on what I was thinking about during meditation and kind of see what that looks like. And I'll journal on that a little bit.
So question for you. So every morning you try to, right? And obviously barring some unforeseen circumstances, weird schedule stuff, you exercise, get your body moving, and that's all done at home.
Yep.
You meditate, you journal about, what's ever come up during the meditation or whatever your mind won't quiet about, right? And then you pull some cards. How long does that whole routine take?
I would say if I don't have a lot of time limits around me, how long I prefer it to take would probably be closer to like 90 minutes to 2 hours. when I do have time restrictions on it, I can get it done an hour and 15 minutes, hour and 30 minutes.
So what time are you, because you have like a busy job, right?
Right.
Like you have a career and a job. So what time are you typically waking up to get that done?
Well, recently, actually, I have kind of pushed back my wake up time closer to 6 o'clock. But prior to that, I was getting up pretty religiously at 5:15.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and tell us a little bit, because I think this is good, and you were the one that taught me this about, like, I think people need to think about what are their good times of day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people, you and I, here at 8 whatever on a Sunday morning are morning people, right? But not everybody is. And I remember you told me one time, like, why would you not give your best time to yourself, right? If you're a morning person, which I am, and what I used to do is I would wake up at the crack of dawn, get ready and go straight to work, right? Because like my mind is sharp, I'm ready to roll, like I'm my best self.
Right.
And I would like to start working between 6:45 and 7. But you said to me, like, why would you, not give that time to you?
Right.
So I think I just like that little nugget of wisdom there that you shared. But how, do you find being able to take an hour and a half out of your day every single day? Like, how does that work with your job and family and everything else? Because I think that's the pushback we'll hear from people, right?
Right.
How the hell am I going to have 90 minutes, right?
Yeah.
To sit down and do that.
Yeah. I think for me, in this stage of my life, like it's not difficult. As far as schedules, my partner does not get up early in the morning. So I'm generally the only one awake. I don't have anybody that I need to like get on a bus or, get to daycare, and my job, generally we're not starting meetings till 8:30 or 9. So I'm not, I have that time available, but there were times in my life when I didn't have that time available, in the same way. And so I had to be more, I had to pack all of what I needed to do into a smaller time period. Had to get up a little bit earlier. Like that's kind of where that like 5:15 mark came for me, is because of that. And because I'm someone who, once I set a routine, I'm like, let me just obsess about this routine a little bit. I was stuck in that 5:15 bubble, and then I'm like, God, I'm so tired, I want to sleep more, and it was like, well, then why aren't you sleeping more? Like, why don't you sleep till 6 o'clock? Like, you'll be like, you can
still make it to the 9 o'clock meeting and
right.
do all your stuff. Yeah.
Right. So, and that's where I, encourage people to be flexible as things change in your life. Or just, I was sick over the last week, and there were a couple of days that I didn't meditate. And I got up and did yoga and didn't meditate. So but I knew that movement was what I needed to do in order to kind of like move congestion through my body and stuff. Like I wasn't like, in here doing some kind of, crazy
cardio hit workout.
No, I was doing some more restorative like stretching work, but I knew that was helpful for my body. But then sitting down to do meditation, like I just couldn't get into it because I didn't feel well. Right. And it was more beneficial for me at that point to sleep.
To rest, yeah. Listen to your body.
And that's, sometimes that's difficult for me, because once you get into a self-care routine and you're like, this is good for me and I like it and I feel good about what I'm doing, on the days where you have to miss it because of whatever, because there's an emergency, because, today I've got to drive to Columbus instead of working in Dayton, or, my kid's sick or whatever, you start to get down on yourself like, oh my God, like, well,
I think there's some anxiety, right? I know for me, like when I get out of my routine, like I get anxious. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, like if I miss it today, am I going to miss it tomorrow? Am I going to be totally lost again? Yeah, I think there is some anxiety. But I also think you have to balance that with listening to your body.
Yeah.
If you were up for 3 hours in the middle of the night, no, your body needs to sleep that extra hour.
Yeah. And reminding yourself that like I have a choice every day as to whether or not I'm going to do this. So if I don't do it today because I'm making the choice to honor my body or my spirit or my mind in a different way, that doesn't mean that tomorrow I can't go back and make a different choice.
Right.
And also, I think when you get into a good groove and you're doing self-care practices on a more regular basis, my mentor told me this, you kind of build up a bank.
Yes, I do think that's true.
You build up this bank of resiliency and this bank of, like self-care, where you've like filled yourself up. And so if you have to miss a couple days, it's not the end of the world because you have something to pull from.
Right. Yes. There's still some strength there. Okay. So you wake up in the morning, you do that routine, right? And I also have a morning routine. It is not mine doesn't last as long as yours does, but I do think, at least for me, having a practice every morning grounds me and like gets me started on the right foot, right? But I do think that when you have a stressful job, or you have a stressful job and kids, right? Or you have, people you're taking care of, the day can derail quickly.
Yes.
So I'd be curious too to hear about like, what do you do during your work day, or even like your days off, like your Saturdays and Sundays when you're running around like with family obligations, doing things like that. What are some like tried and true safeguards that you put in place during the day to keep yourself on track?
I think I'm thinking about like tasks or like tangible things that I do during the day. And, I try to make sure like I'm hydrated. I try to make sure that I have food during the day because sometimes, like in my job and probably a lot of your jobs as well, meetings are back to back to back to back to back. As much as I would like to have, 5 or 10 minutes between meetings, I don't.
Right. Or as much as I would like to have a lunch hour.
Right.
The number of 12 o'clock and 1 o'clock and 11 o'clock meetings I have is crazy.
Like, nobody cares.
Nobody wants you to have
Nobody
lunch.
even thinks about, like, not scheduling a meeting at noon. Which is, and to me, honestly, like, it's okay. But also I know that I need to make sure that I'm eating during the day because otherwise I get run down easier. I'm a lot more tired in the evening. I can become kind of cranky. And so I'm like, I need to make sure that I'm eating. So I always make sure, like, especially if I'm going into the office, a lot of times I work from home, I kind of have a hybrid schedule. And so, if I can do some meetings at home in the morning, then I can make myself a nice breakfast, as we're moving through things, and I can make sure that I'm getting, that nourishment, like, on a larger level at the beginning of the day so that I can just take some snacks and some easy things to eat during the day. But I like to make sure that, I've got a plan for what I'm going to eat. Because what happens to me often is I will either not eat, because also no shock to most people, there's just certain things that I don't eat. Or I avoid. I don't eat a lot of meat. I don't eat dairy. I avoid gluten. And so it limits, like if I'm out in the world, getting ready to, and I'm like, I'm really hungry, I want to grab something, it limits my choices. And so then once I'm hungry, I get frustrated and then I'm like, fuck it, I'm not going to eat.
Well, because it's too hard to find something to eat. Yeah. Well, and like you said too, when there's I know for me, I have to, like, I feel like so much of my week and mornings, are spent planning, like, what am I going to eat? What, how am I going to pack it? Where do I need to put it? Because it's just so hard. Like if I'm like, oh, I'll just bring nothing to work and I'll grab something.
No.
I never have time. Calamity strikes. It's 2 p.m. and I'm like deranged and hangry and I feel like shit and I've lost it. Like I've lost my energy. I've lost my groove.
Yeah.
And that was a big thing. It took me a long time to learn how to like be a professional adult in that way. But I mean, yeah. So for me, always part of my, like what I would call my weekly self-care routine is like, I put in a grocery order. I hate to go to the grocery store. So I put in a grocery order. I know you like to go like putter around now. I put in my grocery order and I think like, okay, do I have enough snack items? What am I going to have for breakfast? What am I going to have for lunch? And I spend time typically every weekend putting things in. Like I pre-portion all of like if I buy a bag of grapes, I like put them into like 4 little Tupperwares on Sunday because I know I'm crazy because I know that if I'm moving, and I have a lot of mornings that start early. Like I have at least 2 days a week, every week that start at 7 a.m. And if I want to have time to do my morning routine and I want to sleep enough, I'm not having time to like pack and rinse and package, you know what I mean? All of this food.
Right. Yeah.
And so what happens is that I don't wake up with enough time, and then I don't have time to pack my lunch like in a way that's meaningful before I go to work. So then I do one of the bullshit, oh, I'll pick something up, and then I don't, and I'm crazy. So for me, so much, like, I feel like a lot of my self-care hinges on like making sure my little Tupperwares are packed and my food is pre-portioned and my water bottles are washed and ready and all of that good stuff. Because I do think when you have a stressful job and you do not plan for the hydration and the eating, you're just setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
Every single day.
Yeah. And you create more, outside of the just stress on your body and the stress on, and then it becomes stress on your mind, right? Because once your body starts like screaming, I'm hungry, your mind's like, shut up, I've got 1,000 other things to do, right? So then there's this internal fight. But then also you create stress for yourself externally because you start communicating differently. You start talking to people differently. And then
you're frustrated more easily.
And then you're creating more stress for them, which then in turn creates more stress for you. And it just becomes a spiral. So eat. Make sure you're eating.
I know this feels basic, but it also feels to me like one of those things, like the no one ever told you life was going to be this way things. Like one of the things that I wish somebody would have said to me, like, okay, Jill, like you're a big girl with a 9 to 5, but a 9 to 5 can be a 7 to 4 or an 8 to 4:30, whatever. Like you have a job, like you need to think critically about how you're going to eat during the day.
And not eating, and that's the other thing I hear a lot of people do too, is like they don't bring lunch. And so, and especially in the social service field, sometimes you're just out and about. And so you just like hitting drive-thrus, hitting gas stations, stuff like that, and picking things up. And, it's food, right? But also, is it nourishing you, or is it making you feel like crap? Is it making you feel sluggish in the rest of the day? So making sure that you're choosing things that are that are actually going to fuel your body.
And I know, like for me, back when I did more casework, like where I was out and about in the field more, in the shelters or at the jail, sometimes like I knew where I would be. I wouldn't have access to a fridge or a microwave or something like that, like to bring food. But what I would do then is I would always make sure I had water, and I would always at least bring some healthy snacks. Right. So maybe I am running through McDonald's and getting like chicken nuggets, right? But I also had packed grapes. I also had packed, you know what I mean? Like some other stuff that was healthy and that I knew could kind of like, even though that main course was going to be kind of shitty, there was other stuff to kind of bring me back up, to kind of balance me out. Yeah.
What kinds of things, so you talked about fruits and vegetables, what kinds of things do you pack when you take things with you to work to make sure that you have food?
So I like a hot lunch a lot of the time. So sometimes like I'll make like chili or soup. Sometimes though I'll pack like a sandwich, or I'll like turkey and cheese roll up. I love chips and salsa. I mean, like chips and salsa is one of my main food groups, so I often pack chips and salsa for a little snack. But a lot of I usually have at least pack 2 pieces of fruit. I don't really like a vegetable very much. And then just like usually like 2 pieces of fruit, a main course, a little snack like a chips and salsa. And then sometimes on my early mornings, I pack my breakfast too, because I don't like to eat super early. Yeah. So sometimes I often will pack my breakfast, and then maybe at like 9 or 10, I'll go grab that and do that. So that's what I do food wise. And I always, always, always have a thing for water, like whether it's my Stanley or my Yeti or my Tervis, like I can't not have a water bottle. Yeah. Because I
bring water too.
I will get a horrible, horrible headache, and like hitting the drinking fountain like isn't gonna do it for me. No. I think the other thing that I feel like is a good during the workday self-care hack for me, and this might have been something you taught me to. All of my self-care hacks come from Amber, but I do try to be mindful with my schedule. Like I organize my day by using my Outlook calendar. My office uses, all the Microsoft Office stuff. So I keep everything on my Outlook calendar, including my personal stuff. So I copy my personal stuff into my Outlook calendar. So I do have one, organizational thing that has all of my appointments on it. Because sometimes like during lunch, I might do a third wheel thing, right? Or, my doctor's appointments or, other stuff that you have going on. I'm on some different boards and things like that. So I integrate that all on one calendar. But I used to, like, when people would email me and call me and be like, oh, Jill, like, I need, let's schedule a phone call or let's schedule a meeting. Like, when can you get together? And I used to tell people literally every free time in my calendar. Like, I'd be like, oh, I have a 45-minute break from 11 to 11:45. I would tell them every free spot and never protect any unscheduled time.
Yep.
So one thing that I've definitely done over the last couple of years is I do not tell everyone every unscheduled piece of time that I have. And I now can look at my week and eyeball it, and I'm able to set the boundary, which we need to talk about. Amber and I were saying this before. Self-care, I think, is both habits and boundaries.
Right.
And we'll get into the boundary piece in a minute. But now I look at my schedule and I can look at the week and say, this week is full. Like, this week is tapped. Some days are busier than others, but knowing the volume of emails I have to deal with, the number of crises that we have pop up during the week, like, this week is full. And so people are like, can you meet this week? I'm like, no. My week is full, and so that's one thing too, is making sure you protect some of those breaks in your calendar. That your calendar, just because there's free time, does not mean that you need to schedule something in there. And I used to think it did. Like, I used to literally have days where I would have scheduled time from 7:30 until 5, which is insane.
And I used to be very diligent about that. Excuse me.
No, go ahead and get your cough out.
There we go. Okay. I used to be very diligent about that. And I would always schedule 5 to 10 minutes at least between meetings. In case something ran over, so that I didn't have to, like, be late to the next thing, or just to, like, have a minute to go to the bathroom or whatever.
Right.
Which is huge. Sometimes, because sometimes you sit in meetings to the point that you're like, I have to pee so bad.
Your whole abdomen hurts. I feel like that's a hallmark of a social worker. Like, we know that feeling, like, where your body hurts, like, from your knees to your armpits, because you have to pee so bad.
Yeah.
It's, like, painful. Because, you'll go 6 hours without peeing.
Yeah. And I guess I just realized that this week, as I was coming back from vacation, when you come back from vacation, you have to pick up all of the things that you missed, right?
Oh,
so your week coming back is generally kind of a little hellish, and I walked, into that, and I had a day where I literally was on meetings from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. with no break in there. And, and then you're just, like, praying that somebody cancels a meeting, because please let someone say that they can't do this, because I'll be so grateful. And I wasn't, and also I broke another rule because I was sick, and I was working while I was sick from home, because I was like, I have to do this. I've been off for an entire week. I have to get this stuff done. Right. And so, that wasn't good self-care for me. But, what I would have liked to do was, sleep while I was sick would have been
Call
wonderful.
off work and heal, yes.
Right. But also, as I was doing that day, I think it was really, it was a good learning opportunity for me, and probably was what I needed in order to kind of snap back into, like, Amber, you need to get your schedule under control. Like, this is not acceptable, and this is not a way that you can be productive with your team and with getting things done, by sitting in literally 8 hours of meetings back to back with no break. And so next week I'm going to intentionally look at that. And because at my job now, I'm moving into kind of a different role, it really made me kind of evaluate, like, what are you doing right now as a supervisor? Because I'm going to be supervising supervisors again. And I don't want to model that for them. I don't want them to think that that's the standard, or that that's what they have to do, because it's not. It's absolutely not.
Well, no, it's not. And I think for me, you just made me think while you were talking, like, I think one of my best self-care practices and habits at work and in my personal life is being okay with disappointing people. like people pleasing and self-care, sometimes you can navigate both, but often they are in direct opposition of each other. And I think that I have gotten a lot better at being like, I'm going to cancel this meeting. And you know what I mean? And somebody's going to feel some type of way about it, right? Somebody's going to say like, you know, Jill's doesn't give a shit about this, you know, initiative, right? Or Jill isn't providing me like the support that I think, you know, that I need and all of this stuff. But it's like, you have to every single day make the decision, am I going to disappoint someone else or am I going to disappoint myself? Right. And sometimes you disappoint yourself. Right. And sometimes you disappoint someone else. But no, I've definitely gotten better at being like, hey, you know, we talked about this a couple episodes ago with just like admitting defeat sometimes. Right. Admit when you make a mistake and just be honest and be like, listen, I'm in back-to-backs from 8 until 4. And if I do this, I know that my 1, 2, and 3 o'clock meetings are fucked, right? I'm going to be completely brain dead. Right. I might as well not even go to them, right? Because I'm going to just be totally tapped. So I know we had a 12 o'clock, but can we reschedule for tomorrow? Yeah. And what's so funny to me is like the first time I did something like that, like I was so scared. Like I don't know what I thought would happen, right? Right. Like that the person would like go off on me or that, you know, everything that I've worked for in my career would all fall apart, right? Because I couldn't be perfect. But no, 9 times out of 10, I don't even think it phases people. No. And then I think about like how people ask me to reschedule shit all the time. And most of the time I don't even care. So I'm like,
or you're grateful because like I would have wanted that the other day where somebody was like, can we reschedule? I'd been like, yes, thank you. Yes. Thank you.
We had, when my social work supervisor that I supervise and then she kind of directly supervises the rest of my social workers, she was on maternity leave and we've all just been, you know, we've been very sad without her. We're making it. We're operating another C+ kind of level. No, actually I'm proud of us with how good we're doing without her. But yeah, we had like, it was like 2 or 3 weeks in and we just kind of had all of this calamity strike in our personal lives and she was gone and we were supposed to have this team meeting. And I'm like, what the fuck are we going to talk about at this team meeting? Except for like how sad and stressed we all are and like how much we miss her. And, you know, I'm directly, they've all had to listen to me for hours on end already that week. But man, just the anxiety I felt canceling it. And then I canceled it and they're all like, oh, thank God. Like, I had so much to do. Like, it was so nice to get this hour back, you know. And so that's what I think we have to remember is that you have to, like, check that perfectionism and people pleasing because, like, whatever consequence you think there might be, it's probably, people literally aren't even going to care most of the time. Right. You know? And I think that a lot. I'm like, and sometimes I think, for as you advance in your career, I know for me, I get asked to be on a lot of things. Yeah. They're like, do this coalition, do that coalition, be in this work group, be in that work group. You know, and when I was building my career, I said yes to everything, right? Yeah. Because like you want to make those connections and you want to show that you can hustle and you can do all this work. But another thing I've had to get good at in that same vein of disappointing others is to be like, I do not have the space on my plate. I'm excited about what you're doing. I think it's really fucking cool what you're doing. I think it's necessary and needed. You know, tap me if we need to like consult for a quick phone call, but I can't come to your meetings. Right. And that sucks, you know?
And sometimes I find, you know, in those spaces, I'm able to say like, I can come to your quarterly meeting and be at the table to like listen and to give some input, but I can't do more than that. Like, I can't be, like, the person who, you know, takes this initiative and runs with it between the quarters. You know what I mean?
Right, like that's drafting stuff or doing research or, Yeah, and I think that's another kind thing to do and good practice is to set those boundaries ahead of time. Because then I know for me, what really erodes some of my self-care and my peace is I will overcommit. And then I'll know in my gut that I've overcommitted. Yeah. And then I'll feel guilty. And then I'll feel some shame because I'm a shamey ass person. And then I'll like need to tell the person that I can't do what I was going to do. Right. And then you have to have that really hard conversation where had I just been honest like you and been like, I think this is cool. I will come to your meeting 4 times a year and give feedback. I will be available if you want to call me, right, to schedule a one-on-one to discuss. But this is all that I can do. And when you say that in the front, then you can avoid the whole shame and guilt spiral from the overcommitment on the back end.
Yeah.
Another thing that I feel like is a good self-care practice for me that just reminded me of this is I consolidated to one phone. So I used to have an office phone, a work cell phone, and my personal cell phone. And now my office forwards to my personal cell phone, and I ditched the work cell, which is interesting because I think some people would say their self-care is having two phones.
Yeah.
My self-care is having one because I engaged in so much like deranged avoidance of my work cell. Like I never wanted to look at it. Like I never wanted to like check the voicemails on it. It rang and I would get so anxious. So it's so much better now that everything is on one phone for me. But my voicemail gives that boundary up front. Like if you ever call me, anyone on here, if you call me and I don't answer, it's like, thank you so much for calling. Please text me. Please text me. You can leave a voicemail. And I used to say, I will return all voicemails in 3 business days. If you leave me a voicemail, you know I return all voicemails in like 7 to 14 business days. Because I just, with email and text and everything else, I just can't get to it. But I feel so much better about that boundary because my voicemail explicitly says,
just text.
No fucking promises if you leave a voicemail. Yeah. I will give you a promise if you text me.
Right.
And that, you know what I mean? And that takes away the anxiety. And now like when I go and do presentations and you know, give people my contact, I'll say straight up, I'm like, if you call, I will not answer. I do not answer a number I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either.
I don't. But then I feel good. I feel better about that. I feel less guilt and shame because the expectation is clearly stated on my voicemail. Send me a text message.
I don't have the send me a text on my voicemail, but maybe I should put it on there. But I also, I have one phone. And my office phone rings there. And I don't have a work cell. And I didn't want one when we moved toward that. But I do think there is a difference between being in direct service and being in a manager level where you're not having as much client contact in the phone situation. Because I know like with the people that I supervise, they have an agency cell phone. And
all my
it is
people do too.
imperative that they only use that phone when they're contacting clients, for HIPAA reasons, for boundary reasons, and all of those types of things, for ethical reasons. And then also it gives them the ability to turn that phone off at the end of the day, because we are not a 24-hour service. So, our voicemail says, our business hours are from this time to this time, Monday through Friday. If you're having a medical emergency, please call 911. And, if you're having a mental health crisis, call 988 and all the things. So, so it's on there on the voicemail, like what to do, and we'll get back with you when during business hours. But I think there is a difference there, and I think that that's a good self-care practice if you are working with clients directly that contact you via your cell phone or via a work cell phone, that you really are shutting that down during hours when your work is not paying you.
Yes.
To interact with those clients.
And I think that, for answering the phone and email and all of those things. But for me, like the work cell phone kind of learning, to me that was like a really good example of being honest with yourself about what is really working and how that has evolved. Like the first 7 to 8 years of my career, yes, I think I needed new cell phones because I was learning about boundaries, right? And I was learning about turning my cell phone off, and I was, learning how to, I think my ethics were always good, but they weren't as ingrained and, that grounded in me as they are now. And I think I was so used to like preaching that to everybody, like you need to have 2 phones and you need to turn it off, but it was making me crazy.
Yes.
And being able to be honest with myself to say this routine or this practice or this habit that has worked for me for so long and that I truly tell the people that work for me that they need to do and that I think works for them does not work for me. So how do I, find a way to make that work? And I think that's when you're like in the level 2 of the self-care. Because I think the first practice of self-care is the habits, right? It's like all the things you talked about, the exercise. And I think with our self-care habits, we teach this in our training. You have to be honest with yourself about what you really enjoy doing. A good example for me is like exercise. I fucking hate exercising. I hate it so much. I just hate it. I mean, I wish that like people are like, oh, I go to the gym and I feel better. I'm like, I don't know what you mean. But I know that I need to move my body. But, I'm in a place now where I know I don't like it. So I give myself like a lot of leeway. Like, Jill, you have to do it, but you can do whatever you want. You can walk, you can elliptical, you can yoga. I have like a couple things that are like less offensive, right? And every day I'm like, pick what you want and pick when you want to do it. Sometimes it feels good to do it in the morning. Sometimes I'm like, I would rather die than do this morning, right? Sometimes it feels good to do it in the evening. And so I think, you have to be gentle with yourself about the habits, but you have to, we have to recognize that we have to do these habits. And I think that's kind of like level one is like integrating these habits, all the things that we've talked about: sleeping, eating, drinking, exercise, meditating, reading books that fill you up, right? Spending time with loved ones. But then like that second level of self-care practice is like your boundaries and protecting yourself and critically looking and saying, what is causing me an inordinate amount of stress and anxiety every day? And what can I do? What can I trust myself to do to fix that? And not to like harp on the phone thing, but I think when I do have clients that have my personal cell phone number, and there are probably social workers listening to this that would have something to say about that, right? That would be like, oh man, like dicey ethics, like wading into gray area. But it's like, no, I trust myself and I know that's what works for me. And I think that is kind of, for at least for me, a leveling up of taking care of myself. I know, like I had a client text me, people text you at the wildest times, like 9 o'clock on a Saturday. And it's just chilling there in my phone. I haven't texted back, right? I didn't answer. But I think it's that trusting of yourself and being like, no, I feel strong and I can stand strong and that this is serving me right now.
Yeah. It's that integrating, right? Like you do the habits, like the, kind of like tasks. Like I know that these are my self-care to-do list things for the day, right? And you start in that space as you are building those self-care habits. And then as you move forward and those become more of a habit and you understand how they fulfill you and why they're important, then you start to be able to really look at them critically and determine, what else do I need? How else do I change this? And then I think that's where kind of like that critical lens to the boundaries and like, what else do I need around this in order to make it fulfilling? And then you get those like higher level concepts of the boundaries. And it's not boundaries like task boundaries, because we can set task boundaries, right? We can be like, I will not answer my email after this time. I will not do this. But like when we can internalize that and feel okay about it while we're doing it, instead of checking it off of a box.
Instead of being like, I didn't answer my emails all night, but I'm going to work with like an inordinate amount of dread about what has transpired since I like rigidly did not let myself check. But I think, that you start to find more of the peace when you're able to feel okay about it. Because to me, it's like, I feel like I got better at like, I'm not going to check my emails, but I did go to work with the dread, right? But then I got better at being like, even if shit hit the fan, we will all be okay. And, and some of that comes from working for a long time and watching shit hit the fan, every day and realizing, oh, we're all still here, right? We all still made it. But I think, that integration is huge. So I want to talk a little bit about, because I don't think we've gotten to this yet, is like boundary setting maybe more in like our personal lives. Like, if we have like, maybe some of us have some energy vampires, right, in our lives, or people that just like their stress kind of becomes our stress, right? I'm thinking about family. I'm thinking about some friends that can really kind of interrupt our peace and our groove. Like I know for me, back before I had good self-care practices, I would have my to-do list, right, of things I wanted to do. Like maybe I had an evening free, right? And I would be like, oh my gosh, like, maybe I'm going to like cook. Well, I would never choose to cook dinner, but maybe I'm going to like eat dinner and like watch a show or go for a walk, right? Do a little creative or crafty project. And then like a friend or a family member would call me with their crisis and I would be on the phone for 2.5 hours. Or like somebody would text me and be like, hey, we're going out to the bar, meet us. And I would feel too scared to say no. And then everything derails. And I think a lot of people, me included, struggle with, again, not pleasing ourselves, but pleasing someone else and letting somebody else's shit or invitation completely derail our day. So can you give us some wisdom on how to kind of work through some of that? like some of that boundary setting,
Well, sometimes I think that we don't set boundaries like that. That we're hesitant to set them out of just that fear and guilt and shame, like I'm supposed to do this, like somebody has called me in their time of need and here I am and I should definitely attend to this person because that is what I'm supposed to do. And those are just some old stories that you've brought along with you throughout your life. Those are old stories that have been told to you by society, by your family, by your friends, by whoever. And you have to really, it's different for everyone, right? So you have to kind of go back and say, like, why do I think that this is my responsibility? Like, who told me this is my responsibility to do this? Is it really? Because I think holding space for people is different than like diving in and fixing everything.
Right.
I can hold space for you. If you call me and you're like, oh my God, all these terrible things happen and I have plans to do something else that I would rather be doing for myself, I can hold space for you and allow you to tell me those things. And I can say, hey, that's really, I hear you and that's really awful. And what do you need? And is there something that I can do right now? Right? Yeah. Instead of saying, I will do all of these things for you.
Let me come over to your house.
I will prescribe this to you, right? Because I think this is what you need. And because a lot of times people really just want to tell you, right? And they may want something and they may be vulnerable enough to ask, but then to close that off when we're done and we say goodbye on the phone and we say, okay, that is yours and I'm going to give it back to you. Right? Because that's not my shit to hold on to.
I'm not going to take it with me.
No, it's your stuff for you to let go of.
Yes.
Not that like you should hold all that shit. Like nobody should have to hold all that shit, right?
But certainly not me.
But not me.
Because it's not even mine.
And I think that's the boundary that you set. It's not the boundary of like, I'm not going to answer the phone. And sometimes it has to be that, right? I mean, we have people in our life that are like serial energy suckers, right? Like we know that they are only calling to like just dump their day on us. Right. And so we may be like, okay, I'm not available for that today, so I'm not going to answer the phone today, or I will call them back later when I've got 30 minutes to listen to this, and then give it back to them with love and move on.
Yes.
Right. But I think that's really the boundary is, I'll hold space for you.
Right. Like I have time until 7.
Right.
And I will sometimes preface phone calls with that too. Like when somebody calls me like during the day, I'll be like, I'll be like, hey, what's up? I got 15 minutes, lay it on me. Cause then it's against kind of like that from the beginning boundary set, right? So I don't have to obsess the entire time we're on the phone that I'm going to have to hang up with you in 15 minutes to get to my next thing. But I also think it's the understanding, like I will hold space. I will listen. If you ask for advice, I will try to give it. But this is all yours. I am here as an observer, not a taker-honor kind of deal.
No.
Yeah, I think that's a really good one. And I think too, when you understand that someone else's shit is not your shit, you feel like less compulsive about answering the text right away, about, being on the phone for way longer than you want to be, about when they're like, I'm lonely and sad, rearranging your whole Saturday to go spend time with them, right? Like we have to understand that often, people's resentment, frustration, anger is just a product of their own stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I always like the question when you're holding space of what can I do for you? What do you need from me right now?
What do you need? Is it just listening?
Right. Because it's not often that somebody is going to say that they need from you all of the things that you would impulsively do for them if you were trying to you know what I mean? A lot of times they're like, no, I don't really need anything from you right now, but thank you for listening to me. A lot of times that's the answer.
Yeah.
Right? Or the answer is, if you could send me that phone number to whoever so I can call them, that would be helpful. And then you've just spent the 30 or 45 minutes of holding space and you're sending a phone number and you feel good because the person has been heard.
Yes.
You've held the space for them. You knew walking in that you were not going to take on their stuff. And then you can back up out of it, and you don't have to sit and like, oh my God, well, I got to go do this for them and this for them. And what about this? And I'm sure they didn't think about this, because it's not yours anymore. They asked for what they needed and you gave it to them. And I think it's the same way, like with clients. Like we think about it when we work with clients, and that's how we hit burnout, right?
Yes.
Because we hold all of their shit. We're like, oh, that's a terrible story. I will just put it back here with all the other stories, and I will, I'll
carry it with me
on.
forever. Yeah. No, I do think that consistent boundary setting. And I have to, as somebody who is like I can be kind of codependent. I can be really kind of controlling and like, try to attempt to control things happening around me and things happening in my loved one's life, right? I can be like a very compulsive kind of helper, because I think, many of us, I think especially women who are old, I'm an oldest, and I think, helping is where we got a lot of validation and praise. Yeah. So I think that, I can really, really want to do that, but that is something, and actually what's part of my morning routine is I have like a special, I think you could call it a prayer, a devotion, a thing I either write or say every day. And it's a reminder to myself every day, like to maintain those boundaries, that I do not need to manage everything and everyone around me, that any of my attempts at control are futile, right? And not working. And I truly say that to myself every day.
Yeah.
Because otherwise that compulsion will come in. And I think that's something that we have to learn to integrate.
Right. And I think that's a great self-care practice as well, is to find those mantras or those reminders that you can tell yourself all day long, that you do every day, that you say every day, because it pops back in. Like and I've said this before, but I've had the mantra for a long time that my journey is guided. And that means a lot of different things to me at different points in time. But when I get stuck, sometimes I'm like, Amber, your journey is guided. Like, what are you doing right now? Like, there's no reason for you to be like pushing this hard or worrying this much or being this angry or, there's no reason, because your journey is guided. Another thing that I've just kind of brought into my practice here in the last year as I've learned Reiki is the Reiki precepts, which are, for today, I will not anger, I will not worry, I will be grateful, I'll be honest in my work, and I'll show compassion for myself and others. And so the way that shows up for me sometimes is like, I get into a sticky situation, or I get stressed, or I start feeling some anxiety or some kind of way, and I'm like, Amber, for today, you don't have to worry.
You don't have to do that.
Not today. You don't have to.
I know. I agree with you. And I think you have to remember that. Like when I kind of was developing this, I was just really struggling with some depression, right? And I would think, and I thought about over time, like, what are the things that trip me up, right? So there's like a couple different things, but one of them is I will not manage, manipulate, or control, but trust, be honest, and have faith, right? Because, like the managing, if you trust that the universe is unfolding as it should, if you trust that everyone is going to be the hero of their own story, and they don't need you. They don't need you to be the hero of their story. Right. They don't need me. They don't need you, Jill, your fucking unsolicited advice and all of your, meddling in there. Like, just trust. Don't manage, just trust. Right. Right. And then manipulate, like, just be honest, right? Like, stop trying to work every angle. And then obviously, when you have some faith, you don't necessarily feel like you need to control everybody either. But that was a big one for me. And the other one is I think about how I want to show up as a leader. I will try to, I always say, let me have patience and lead by example. Because I can be, if you work with me or for me, I can be a little snappy sometimes. I'm not always super patient because I do have a lot on my plate. But I tell myself every day, like, Jill, be patient. Right. And lead by example, that if somebody looks at you, people are looking to you. Right. for, and don't be fucking crazy, right? Like, don't work yourself too hard. Don't be snappy. Don't be resentful. Don't be nasty. Don't be jaded. Try to embody, like, you have a lot of eyes on you.
Right.
Try to, embody how you want everybody to grow and be. And so, but I have to tell myself that every single day.
Yeah, I do too. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's definitely something that is a guidepost for me when things get, when things get a little wild. It's like, oh yeah, wait a minute. Stop. For today, I can just show compassion for myself and others.
Yes.
For today, I can just be honest in my work.
Yes.
I think that's huge. So I would encourage, and I've talked to people about setting mantras or setting, and call it what you want to call it, like your, I don't know, like your tagline that you use, or whatever. I mean, you can call it whatever you want to call it. Your slogan, get it printed on a t-shirt. But
tattoo it on your body. I think about tattooing mine on my body, but keep going.
Yeah, no kidding. But I think, sometimes it's hard to come up with something, because, you get very stuck in like, well, I got to choose the right mantra. And you don't. Whatever it is that feels right for you, the thing that you tell yourself that kind of sets you, can like help you turn a corner. Like if you hear this phrase, like it kind of helps you like refocus. Use it as your mantra. If you use it for a couple weeks, if you don't like it, choose a different one.
Well, and when I like created mine, mine is really more, I would call it more like a prayer, because it's probably like, maybe like 10 lines, right? And a lot of them are like, let me not do this, but let me do this instead, right? But mine really came from like months and months. So part of my morning routine, quick and dirty, like I get up, I typically read anywhere between like 5 and 10 pages of some kind of like self-help or devotional book, right? I read a lot of stuff out of the AA Big Book, and 12 Traditions. I read a lot of Brené Brown, a lot of Glennon Doyle. I've read so many self-help books, it would blow your mind. But yeah, I usually read a couple pages of that. And then I do a little journaling, and then I pull some cards. But for so many months, like I would just write down like the key things and the things I was reading, right? Like the stuff that really resonated for me. And, and what you find is when you do a lot of that reading and reflection is you hear the same things over and over again. So for me, like this kind of prayer probably developed over like 6 or 8 months. And it was like, what are kind of the 4 or 5 reoccurring themes that spoke to me, right? And things that are going to speak to me are probably not going to speak to other people because of their experiences, because of their shit, their trauma, their personalities, their whatever. But I mean, mine, it wasn't like one day I was like, boom, let me not manage, manipulate, or control. I did, kind of engage in this reflection and work and was like, wow, I run into a lot of issues because of these things. And that's kind of where it came from. So I think understanding that it can definitely be like a working kind of thing. And hopefully I will have told myself not to manage, manipulate, and control for so long that in 5 years, that won't even be something I need to remind myself every day of, right? That perhaps my like mantra, my prayer, my reminder to myself will change as I continue to level up.
And I think too, I think like the things that my journey as guided, the Reiki precepts, over time, they mean different things to me. Like my journey as guided meant something completely different to me when I first started saying it than it does now. Because as you grow, as you build more self-care practices, emotional intelligence, I don't want to call it emotional intelligence because that sounds like, if you don't have emotional intelligence, you're dumb, which is not true. Emotional resiliency.
Resilience. Because you build some of that resiliency.
I think, as you do that, you start to reflect on things differently. You start to see them differently. And they mean different things to you because you're able to kind of uncover it in different ways.
Yes. No, I think that's so true. Yeah. It just, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking, so we talked about, kind of like how do we get through our day?
How do we
talked
draw the
about
boundaries?
Food and boundaries.
Drinking water.
And some personal life stuff, how to, make sure that we are taking care of ourselves in that space. And we've talked about a lot, I think, about spiritual self-care here. And I think, with spiritual self-care, I always like to talk about religion in that, because that can be part of your spiritual self-care, is your religious practices. But if you don't have religious practices and that's not something that you are, that you subscribe to, then it doesn't mean you don't have a spiritual practice. It doesn't mean that there's no spirituality to you. Because those things can be the same, but they can also be very different.
Yes.
In our self-care practices. So I think it's just a point to kind of take as you're thinking about that. And if you haven't gone through our self-care training, our initial training, first off, it's available on our store online. You can do it at your own pace. I think it's a 2-hour, we give CEUs for it. It's a workshop type of a thing, so you can go through a workbook and kind of go through the different spheres of self-care. But we go through 5 different spheres of self-care. So we go through the physical sphere, the emotional sphere, the work.
Yeah, we call it professionals,
spiritual,
social,
and the social sphere. So I think we've hit on all of those in this.
I think we have. Yes. No, I think we definitely have. And they're probably, we'll have to listen to this and be like, oops, what did we forget? Because, we didn't talk a lot about therapy, right? Or but we can talk about that in a different thing and making the conscious choice to work through our own shit. Right. But no, I hope that I think this was kind of comprehensive. I hope it's what people were looking for when they asked it. And I think if I were to just sum up my 2 things, right, is when you're starting to build self-care practices, one, just ask yourself, what do I want to do? Deep down, you know what I mean? What do I want to go out and putter around in the garden, right? Do I want to go for a walk? Do I want to lay in my bed and read a good book? I think very rarely we're so preoccupied with what we should be doing that we never say, what do I want? So when you are building practices and thinking about those different spheres, I would say, what do you want to do? What makes sense? If you need to move your body, how would you like to do it today? If you need to eat a healthy food, what food would you like that to be? And then the other thing that I think I wish somebody would have told me, and that I have to consistently still remind myself, is you're never going to get through this life without disappointing people. And, start to be really thoughtful about making those decisions of when I'm going to disappoint myself and when I'm going to disappoint someone else, and make some choices to disappoint other people sometimes. They will be fine. And they might not even be disappointed. To me, those are the big things.
I agree. I think that emotional self-care is extremely important, and I think that it falls within everything else that we do as far as self-care, and it's that integration into your just into your being, and knowing your worth, knowing what you want, knowing how you're going to behave in different situations, and that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work. It's not always easy work. Sometimes we do need to go find, a mentor or a therapist or someone to work with to kind of hash that out. Sometimes we can do some of that stuff individually. Sometimes you can do that through some journaling and some reflection and some self-help books, and and really dedicating the time to it.
Yes.
But it is not an overnight thing. It is not I can make a checklist and check it off every day type of a thing. And as you move through emotional self-care, a lot of times you start finding, oh, that's why I do that.
Yes,
that's
hitting.
That's the old story that isn't even true, that I need to let go of. And those are the hard places, right? When you look at it and you're like, damn it.
Yes. You know what might be good? Maybe we should do this as a part 2, or Amber and I we're a big reader of a lot of books and listeners of a lot of podcasts, I think, around self-help and self-care. And I wonder if we just did a little mini like book and podcast review. Like if you really struggle with perfectionism, this would be a good thing for you. If you do a lot of ruminating about past shit, this would be a good one for you. If you have a lot of fear and anxiety about what the future would hold, what do you think about that?
Yeah.
Because I could bring my whole stack of self-care books.
Yeah.
We could do a little prep for that. But that might be, because I hate, I like to give people actionable tools.
Right.
And another thing that people ask me all the time is like, what book? Because I literally have read so many self-help books, it would blow your damn mind. But I get a lot of questions from people like, which one do you think would be a good one for me? And sometimes I know the person well enough that I'm like, you need to read this one. But sometimes I'm like, dude, I don't really know what you're struggling with. So yeah, maybe you want to do that next time?
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's do that.
Let's do that.
All right, cool.
Do we want to pull a card?
Yeah, pull a card.
What deck do we want to use today?
I don't know, you want to do a tarot today?
Sure.
I think a tarot.
No, we're doing this one.
No.
Sorry,
that's all right.
Joe.
Tarot.
I should not have said it because I already knew. I should not have asked the question.
It's all right. So which deck is this? Tell the people.
I think we've used this one before. The Angels and Ancestors Oracle Cards by Kyle Gray.
I don't think we've done it in the podcast, no.
No?
We chose between them and the Soul's Journey last time,
Okay.
and I chose Soul's Journey.
Okay. All right, so here's another great self-care practice is breathing. So, obviously, if you're driving, don't close your eyes. But if you aren't and you're in a place where you can, I would encourage you to close your eyes and take a deep breath with me. And release. And we're going to set the intention that you are going to receive exactly what you need today for your highest good.
Yes.
That's another great, if you're out searching for a mantra or something to kind of start with as far as telling yourself. That's another great thing that you can do on a daily basis is to take that deep breath and to set the intention that what you receive in that moment is going to be for your highest good. That you're only available for that.
Yeah. Thank you. Nothing else. Nothing else is coming.
That's something that I like to do before meditations, is to just set that intention that I'm just going to receive what I need today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right.
What card do they want to give us?
I've not pulled any cards today, which is odd for me, but I plan on doing it later. Oh,
there it is.
Okay. Oh, we got the Shapeshifter.
Says
and it says transform and unveil your gifts.
Ooh.
So, with the Shapeshifter, you'll see the card on the
socials.
On the social, because we can't put it on the podcast. If anybody knows how to do that and you want to send a little email and be like, hello, dummies, you can put it on like this, that would be great. But otherwise, it'll be on social media. But the Shapeshifter is actually a card where it's got a human person there, and then they're kind of transforming into different animal type shapes. And I will read kind of the message here that it comes along with this deck. It says, take your time and focus on developing your gifts and your strengths. You may have been through many challenges and lows, but now you are in a space of transformation. You are moving beyond your past challenges and honing your current strengths. There are opportunities for you to discover and rediscover the gifts and talents that you were born with and born to share. All of your past experiences have only helped you to see how strong you really are. You are an amazing soul who can change and transform in ways that people least expect. You may have many talents that you will share in your lifetime. You are guided to stay focused on the light, knowing it will guide you forward. So I think, as we're talking about self-care, this is really nice more in that space of living authentically as who you are and allowing what you really want to be available to you.
Yeah, that and I the way I took it is take care of yourself because the world needs you.
Yes.
As your best authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
And everything that you're here to contribute and to do, you got to take care of yourself so you can give that to the world.
Right. Yeah. And you have more to offer than other people may tell you do. Like, you internally know that you have more to offer than maybe others are pointing out.
Or it's all getting lost between the stress and the overwhelm of the day-to-day.
Yeah.
So find a way to manage that so that the true light and work can shine.
Yeah.
Cool.
So transform those self-care practices so you can unveil your gifts, because we all need your light.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been Self-Care for Dummies, Self-Care 101. And we'll come back at you next time, maybe, with some book and podcast suggestions.
All right.
See you guys.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Guided by Third Wheel, the podcast. We would be honored if you would like, rate, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, be well.